Welcome to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Hey, thanks for tuning in, Nerf Herders. I'm Case Aiken, and today I am joined by John Broughton.
Hey, guys.
Today we're going to talk about Star Trek The Motion Picture, and I honestly could not think of a better person to talk to about it than John Broughton. So, John, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about Starship Farragut, which is how I know you.
Well, Starship Farragut is one of the oldest fan film series dedicated to Star Trek. We started around 2004, 2005. We've made numerous films, both live action and animation, and a comic and some other forms of media out there based on the USS Farragut and its crew, which is not Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. It's Captain Carter, Smithfield, and Tackett. And it's a different ship, different crew, different adventures, but not a parody, serious Trek, set in the same original series platform.
Yeah, the Farragut's a canonical ship, right? It's appeared a couple of times in TOS, and then again in TNG it gets some love. But it was referenced in the 2009 Star Trek movie. Uhura gets put on it.
Deliberate too.
Yeah. So it's definitely a love letter to original Trek material, and not just like, okay, we're gonna just poke fun at everything.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Now, John, I have to say, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this movie, especially with you, is that I owe you a debt in my love of Star Trek. I grew up as a Next Gen guy. I watched Next Gen and Deep Space Nine and Voyager in high school, and then in college I kind of missed Enterprise because I just wasn't watching TV that much. But then shortly after college, I met you and started working with you guys on Farragut, and that's when I got into I went back, I rewatched the original series. I finally watched all the animated series. Made a point of watching all of the movies, and really loved it because before that I remembered it. I'd watched some of it. I liked it, but I was like, I'm a Next Gen guy. I like Picard. And really working with Farragut, that's how I sort of revived my love of Star Trek. And me watching Star Trek: The Motion Picture was kind of part of a completionist mode for me. I was like, I've got to watch all these movies because I'd seen Wrath of Khan. I loved Wrath of Khan. It's a great movie. But I'd always heard the motion picture was kind of bad. And I was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to give it a shot. I've heard some counter arguments to it. Let's take a look.
Well, one, I never knew that about you. I mean, I've known you, as you said, a long time ago. You were like one of our young kids, one of our young pups who came to our project and very early. And you were featured, I think, the first time was in For Want of a Nail.
Yeah, I had a quick cameo in there.
And so it's good to hear that through our project, it helped kind of incite you to watch some of the earlier work of Star Trek. To the point of the Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and those that may not be familiar with a little background, it was the movie that was made 10 years after Star Trek was canceled, which went through many iterations in the 70s, and it went through a phase where it was literally called Star Trek Phase 2, and it had a lot of the 70s look and feel woven in the series, and the plan was initially to bring back Star Trek, but to have it as a new television series.
Yeah,
and after the success, the major, unprecedented blockbuster success of Star Wars, Paramount executives said, well, let's push it out as a motion picture.
So now the motion picture was a script from the Phase 2 project, right? Was it the pilot?
Well, I'm not for sure if it was one of the pilots. I would suspect not. It was based on a story that Gene wrote called In Thy Known Image, and it was based about meeting God, from what I remember. Star Trek fans don't quote,
This is not one of the big ones that people talk about a lot.
No, it's not. And it's not, I think, based on all the scripts that Gene had, and he was involved in the first movie, but he wasn't thereafter, and it was more of a consultant and getting his take on the script. But this was the script that they opted to go with.
Right. I mean, this movie, it was not a commercial failure. It actually is one of the higher percentage return ones of Star Trek movies, but it still doesn't have the sort of love that the immediate follow-up Wrath of Khan did.
Correct. Correct. And in terms of timeline, when this movie did come out, it did very well financially. However, the people that after they had seen it, the rapport was that, or the consensus was, this wasn't a great movie. So when they were, 2 or 3 years later, when they opted to do Star Trek II, a lot was banking on reusing sets and costumes and such, and it was a make or break fail. And had the script that Nick Meyer had provided and the directorship of that had not been executed well, we might have seen an end to all the movies and then the franchise itself.
Yeah. Can I tell you a fan theory of mine? I have theorized that with this movie, especially the way that the shots that we got in this movie, that Gene Roddenberry either was holding out hope to do another TV show or to do movies, but with a tight turnaround and possibly at like tighter budgets in some case. And that's why we get these like crazy elaborate like long special effects shots, because that's like classically what you do for like a TV pilot, where you get like, okay, all the special effects that we're going to need with the ships and everything, we're going to get those so we can reuse like little snippets of it here and there later when we make the next episode that happens to be like, oh, we just need a shot of the ship, or we just need like a laser blast image, to chop it all together.
That's an interesting theory. That's one thing I'm sure we're going to talk about is the editing and all the footage that is in this film. There's a lot of special effects, and for the time, for the day, it was quite. I wouldn't say revolutionary, but it's quite extravagant. It's very nice.
Yeah, I mean it definitely came in the way, or it came right out after Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which I think was the thing that really pushed everyone to be like, sci-fi can be a blockbuster. Like Star Wars was like, people weren't sure if it was going to be like a flash in the pan. No one else cares about anything else. Close Encounters follows up, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh wait, people like this stuff. Like it's not just kids' TV anymore. Like we can do real movies about it. And it's part of that like golden age of Hollywood, or not golden, Bronze Age of Hollywood.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So do we want to just dive in? I mean, all right. So pretty famously, there's the odd even rule for Star Trek movies, and this movie sort of starts it off. I don't fully agree, and I don't fully agree with the larger series having that rule, but I get why people say that. I mean, Wrath of Khan is so good, and it's so different. This movie is very much a Roddenberry Star Trek movie.
Yes, it is. It definitely is this. With the theme of the movie, it's definitely got Roddenberry all over it.
See, I've argued, and I've seen other people make the same point about Star Trek movies, is that they tend, for a movie, to make Starfleet more militarized. That's why it's like very military jacket looking in Wrath of Khan, and then like that era of Star Trek films. When you get to First Contact, they have like a much more military kind of look to them. And then with like the new Trek stuff, like 2009, all of a sudden, all the terms are like, you have to enlist in Starfleet. It's a peacekeeping armada. Like these terms, making it so military makes it easier to convey this to a broader audience than for the subtlety of a movie like this movie, or which is sort of doing the same thing that the TV show did, where it's not exactly a military like ship. It is a ship. It has a purpose. It has a mission, but that mission isn't defense or fighting or anything like that. That mission is discovery.
Yeah, and Robert Wise, who was the director of this film, whose work goes back, way back from the 30s, 40s, and then coming up, and he started out, I think, as a video editor. He won an award, an Academy, award for his work on Citizen Kane. Films that he directed that got him a lot of fame. I'm not sure about Gone with the Wind, but certainly West Side Story and Sound of Music, other movies, and some science fiction ones as well. He wasn't a novice when it came to Star Trek.
No, I mean, if he's working on Gone with the Wind and Citizen Kane, we're talking about a Hollywood pedigree right there.
Yeah, and some other sci-fi films as well that Robert Wise had directed. Now, when he started working with Gene Roddenberry on this, he interviewed Bill Tice, the original designer of Star Trek. He rejected his work. He rejected another designer's work, and then he met with Robert Wise. And Robert Wise was meeting Roddenberry, I think, and I could be wrong about timing, but he came up with the designs for the Klingons, which not many people know about, which set the standard from 1979 all the way up to all the movies, all the incarnations of Trek TV, of Star Trek, all the way up. So from 1979, say, to 2004, 2000 time frame, he set the standard what the Klingons were.
Yeah, this is the movie that brought out like the forehead ridges. This is the one that made Star Trek like the most recognizable species in Star Trek. What they are. Like prior to this, they were the smooth-headed, like yellow-skinned, kind of cheap aliens. Like that's actually what they were. Like they were introduced originally to be a cheap alternative to Romulans, which had the much more expensive prosthetic ears.
And he actually, in terms of the, like you say, the ridges it was based on a design that he had for another project. I think that Jack Palance was involved with, and it was more like a lizard kind of creature. And you can see the similarities in his drawings of that image and what the Klingons, what he pitched and what was accepted. But when he met with Robert Weiss and shared his designs, and they were talking, he, like you were saying about the military look, he didn't want to be too overly military, and he said that he did not want a lot of color in the film. So that's why, Robert Fletcher was sometime. I spoke to him last year, and we talked about this, and he said it. I mentioned about the monochromatic look of those uniforms. I called him in regards to Star Trek II and the uniforms for that, and it was we started with the reuse of the uniforms in Star Trek, from Star Trek the motion picture to Star Trek II, because of cost savings. So they had to repurpose those uniforms. They had to re-dye them. They repurposed them. And those became the enlisted jumpsuits.
Okay.
Of everything that you saw, and there's plenty of those different iterations of those costumes, but essentially what you see in the motion picture became all the enlisted jumpsuits. And he mentioned, I just said it was such a difference going from the leisure suits of what they look like, these lounge outfits, to these nice military uniforms. And he just, it was Robert Weiss that really influenced how that military look, that uniform look, which really wasn't a uniform at all. There were so many different colors, and they were all on a monochromatic color scheme, and they had so many different iterations of what Kirk wore and some of the other characters wore that just wasn't consistent. So
You're talking about in 2 through 6?
No, in the first iteration, once Star Trek II came about, there was this uniform palette that became the standard moving forward. But before that, in the motion picture, it's all over the place.
Yeah, no, this one, it doesn't look like there's any sort of like consistent feel aside from like some very minor details from the TV show to this. It's interesting thinking about that in relation to the look of the bridge versus like the 2009 movie where it's like very white, and then they have the classic uniform color scheme, so it pops a bit more. But like you get that same sort of very white to represent the future in this movie too.
Yeah, the colors of these sets and how the sets are lit, it's very bright. It's very warm in contrast to the other movies after this.
Or to the original series where it was very gray for like
yes.
Gray and black were the constant scheme of the actual ship, with like a few bright colors to indicate like this is a railing or this is a pipe to don't touch it. Like the original series looks very submarine-esque, like very naval, which I kind of attribute to so many people who worked on that movie, or pardon me, who worked on the TV show. Having come from military backgrounds, either in World War II or in Korea.
That's correct.
And then you look, and so it all makes sense in that regard. And this one is moving more towards like this utopian future thing that Roddenberry was really pushing,
right?
With like bright colors and no divide, or like much more futuristic looking jumpsuits and lots of interesting choices.
The sets on the motion picture, though, they had a lot of money to spend with, so they went all out, and they're very nice.
Oh yeah,
I mean, the functionality of the sets and how they, in contrast to the original '60s Trek, which was TV. This, I mean, you had Alien come out around the same time as this movie, and so that realistic, more modern feel, like these look like real sets, so that believability aspect went up.
Yeah, the lived-in future is the term for like Alien, and also for Star Wars, like where they have like a worn-down kind of thing. And I think Ralph McQuarrie worked on designs at one point for this, or was it for Wrath of Khan? He was a big designer for Star Wars, but then he submitted some stuff for Star Trek that never actually went anywhere.
Oh.
It's really good that you're noticing all this uniform stuff, because with Farragut, I mean, it's a very all hands on deck, and so you've been responsible for all the costumes, right?
Yes. Making the costumes was a necessity. I couldn't find anyone to make these uniforms, and my tailor that I saw in the Navy he wasn't inclined to make them, so I had to learn how to make them myself, and then so deep diving in the research and the costumes and such, that was what I hone in a lot.
Yeah, you've done fantastic work. I have
Thank you.
One of yours that no longer fits me, that was of the velour original look.
Oh, yeah.
And I wore it to a poker tournament once, and I was just kicking ass because people were like, I know you have a great hand right now, but I can't take you seriously right now. I have to call. The only problem was it was too hot, and I had to change, and all of a sudden, like, my winnings just like ripped away from me. That was the shift there. So yes, the movie looks beautiful. And that actually kind of leads me to my big note about this movie, which is learning to edit. The whole thing is gorgeous, and it's a true Star Trek piece, but it is so slow.
Yeah, I think the overall problem with Star Trek: The Motion Picture is the video edit. You can chop this film down to a much more
Tighter would be
a tighter flow of the whole story that makes it so you don't lose interest. You know what? I think a problem with Star Trek fan films in general is that the person that usually is doing the edit is usually the camera person or the director, and they don't want to cut any of the footage. And I feel like with the motion picture, it's almost like a fan film in some respects, not only about the video edit, but a lot of the story itself has a lot of exposition that is explanation of things.
Well, and some fanficky concepts, like V'ger being Voyager 6. Like, that feels like a concept that someone who's just pitching a Star Trek idea and like just spitballing ideas that sound Star Trek-like. But that said, I don't think that the plot's a bad plot, and I think it's a true to Star Trek movie. So I don't have like a lot, like, you might have some different opinions, but in my opinion, the biggest issue is just that it takes so long to get to everything and to get to every point.
Yeah, you got the beginning sequence of Kirk and Scotty getting in a travel pod and going around the new refurbished Enterprise and all that fanfare. That is just way too long.
It's like, what, 15 minutes?
Yes.
It is so goddamn long.
It is. And then later on when the Enterprise is going into V'ger itself, and you have these exaggerated shots of not only what's going on the outside, but of the characters, the crew members, like looking and their reactions, and it's just way too long.
Yeah, they're pretty, they're beautiful, but it just takes forever, and the movie just grinds to a halt.
Yeah,
every time they have these extended special effects shots that look great, but just
even on the reactions of the crew members, you got like almost like a full minute of Spock, 30 seconds of Uhura, 30 seconds of Decker. I mean, you just need a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
You don't need all this. It's just way too much.
And I mean, we shouldn't try to look at it from the perspective of the modern era, like the music video style editing that has become characteristic of movie making today. Since 2000, and like we've seen a lot of directors who cut their teeth doing either commercials or music videos, getting like bigger movie roles, and as a result, we've seen this like tighter editing become kind of the norm, like this rapid fire style, which has ups and downs, but we shouldn't look at it purely from the context of today where we've gotten used to it. But even movies of that era, like compare it directly to Star Wars. Like, Star Wars had big, elaborate special effects shots, but they were still much shorter and much tighter. Like the best thing you can say about Star Wars, which is an immediate inspiration for this movie coming out, is that its pacing is perfect.
Yeah, and it's interesting that for a guy who directed this film, who got an award for best editing on Citizen Kane, one of the most revered films of all time, to then make this movie. I've seen the director's cut, which came out in 2002 on DVD. When you watch that film, it's actually a tolerable movie. Whenever I watch this, whether as a kid or an adult, I would always fall asleep. on the film. I can never watch it from start to end. And not only does the director's cut work, it's actually a good movie. Like I hated this movie until then.
So it's proof that you can make a better movie out of this, like, which is why this is great fodder.
Yes.
Like, this is an interesting one because I don't think it's a bad movie. I wouldn't call it a good movie either in its purest form, but I think that there's a lot there that could be a great one. Like, the first time someone really had a long conversation with me about this movie, they referred to it as the motionless picture. Other people call it the slow motion picture. The fact that those are its nicknames is a terrible thing.
Yeah. I think my experience working with films, fan films, is that it all comes down to script and story, and you can only do so much with what you have to work with. So putting aside that, because I agree with you. I think it is Trek. It's not probably the best story to tell, but it's not terrible as well. I think overall my criticism would be just on the video edit itself, that it could be cut down and you work from that. In terms of there's a lot of things that I think the film gets overlooked upon, and that is the way the cinematography of this film is extraordinary.
Oh, it's beautiful.
The shots, the framing, the lighting, everything is very crisp. And then you go to Star Trek II, which was made a couple years later, and a lot of that footage is grainy in Star Trek II, which moving forward, you think the quality would be better, but for whatever reason, whether it was just not the aperture in the camera wasn't set right or what have you, but in the motion picture, all the cinematography is well done. The framing, directorship, I thought was executed well.
Yeah, listeners, we have a freeze frame right now. We had the Blu-ray on before we started recording, and it's just a shot of Spock in a spacesuit, and it looks gorgeous. Like, that could be a desktop background for my computer.
Yeah.
Like, every shot looks so good in this movie.
Every shot in the film.
They just didn't want to cut down on it.
Right.
All right, so we talked about the editing. I think a lot of people have talked about that. It's the biggest problem with this movie. Just by having it a little trimmed down, you could have made this movie just a much more effective story, because you would have gotten to your beats and hit those and moved on. So let's talk about the conflict between Kirk and Decker, because that's probably the most interesting relationship in this movie.
Yes. Yes, it is.
And I'm so torn about how it plays out, because Decker, later stuff with the actor aside, like, I really like that conflict, but I think that the way they wrote it would have been better for a TV show where they then had a chance to resolve their differences and move on.
Yeah, I never thought about that. I liked it, and it has got a lot of good dialogue between the two. And I think that the director, whether it was him being able to bring it out of William Shatner or William Shatner just being on point, his acting in this film is actually pretty good. Yeah.
My biggest concern with it, because I like that they have this adversarial relationship where, like, Decker feels like Kirk is stepping in and, like, kicking him out of his spotlight. He literally gets demoted from captain of the flagship of the Federation back down to commander. And I can see that hostility, and that's all great. It's very anti-Roddenberry. Like, famously, during the first 3 seasons of Next Gen, like, they weren't allowed to have, like, interpersonal conflict.
They were not.
Like, and this is right front and center. My problem is that Kirk comes off like a dick, and I don't like that he doesn't seem as well reasoned for his approach. Like, if this was like the way it opens Wrath of Khan, where he's feeling very much benched and sidelined, and we get a lot of scenes about that, and where when he takes command of the ship, it's a bit more of a step out of necessity.
Yeah.
Like, we don't get any scenes before he comes to the Enterprise where we see him feeling like he's stuck.
And you know what? When
as
I
an
think
admiral.
About it, him coming back, it almost seems unlike Kirk to have that kind of reaction. But to me, it came off as something that a legitimate behavior of someone that had something, he let it go, then he wants to take it back, and then just certainly the animosity that Decker has, that he projects, it's legitimate.
Yeah.
But Kirk's reaction, you're right. I never thought of
Like,
it.
let's take the timeline here. So this movie came out 10 years after the show ended. So that means that if they finish their 5-year mission, then Kirk would have been off of that 5-year mission for 8 years at this point.
Well,
so if he became an admiral immediately after his success leading the Enterprise for that 5-year mission, then that means at most he's been an admiral for 8 years, maybe even less. He might have had a command of a ship after that.
I think in terms of the lineage, it's not that long. I think if I remember correctly,
is it even shorter?
I think it's like 5 or 6 years.
Oh, that's even shorter.
Yeah.
So that makes it even less of a he's been off the ship for so long and now he's like desperately reclaiming it. I mean, I guess if he's only been off it for a very small amount of time, he can't even imagine someone else commanding it, which might be the thing. But it seems very different than the professional Kirk that we got in the original series. Mm-hmm. Like, I know the reputation is that he's a hothead and that he's a womanizer and that he's like, like this swashbuckling figure. But he in the show, he was always depicted as being very professional, like maybe a little cocky at times. But it wasn't that he was like a loose poker player. He just knew how to bluff. There's a difference between those two things. And in this movie, I would have liked to see him kind of stuck in hating being like in the administration of Starfleet, like hating that he's doing paperwork when he used to like grace the stars, and like have that be when he gets the opportunity to take a command of the Enterprise again, like he jumps at the chance, rather than he kind of just jumps at the chance without us really seeing it.
But when Kirk takes over the ship, he really doesn't want to take it away from Spock, and it's more about the mission than anything, and.
And there's part of it is that Star Trek II at this point he's getting much older. Mm-hmm. Like whereas in this he's in his like early 40s versus his late 40s, early 50s. Like the sense of Star Trek II, there's the huge plot of him feeling his age and feeling like his glory years are behind him. Whereas in this one, they kind of do the same plot, but it doesn't have the same backing material. Like they have him sort of act that way without scenes to sort of explain it, which it's weird that I'm saying they needed additional scenes earlier in the movie, considering that this is a movie that I wish they would cut about 45 minutes out of. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just a funny dichotomy there.
Mm-hmm. And the part that you said about the administration being in the bureaucracy when he rather be hopping along starships in the galaxy, as they said in the movie, that was in Star Trek too. So Nick Meyer really tapped into that piece that you were just saying.
Star Trek 2 is basically a do-over in a lot of ways. Like like the uniform switch and everything in this movie doesn't really make sense. Like Star Trek 2 has this much more militarized, streamlined uniform, and those are great. And then you could sort of argue that when you get to Next Gen, that people are like, I kind of miss those retro multicolored uniforms, and like maybe it's just like a fad, and then everyone goes back to it. Okay, so the fact that this movie is so famous for like that big glaring flaw, however, I think that sort of is the big thing that I would say needs to be done to make this movie work, right? Mm-hmm. Just tighten it up, because it's just so slow and kind of sloppy in that regard. Mm-hmm. Like, sure, you made a glorious shot of circling the Enterprise, but it takes so long, and movies just don't work that way.
Right, and there's many instances. It's not only, we have those examples of the long shots that need to be condensed, like the V'ger, going in V'ger, and the fanfare of the Enterprise. But there's so many other instances, as I was rewatching the film today, of just cut here, there, cut here and there. And you can take out 30 minutes easily of just stuff that would make the film just flow so much better.
Yeah.
And make the story, make it a really good movie. I think the director's edition did a lot of that, but even in some of that, I saw places that still could be chopped. I think also, too, the positive aspects of this film, that in terms of cinematography, it was well filmed. And the production value, because they had so much money, you look in the beginning scene when the shuttlecraft comes in, or Kirk's, shuttle that comes in, and you've got all these people walking about. It really gives that sense of there's a lot of people in this military organization. When Kirk gets the crew in for that rec room scene, and there's all those people that of background actors, and people, they brought in a lot of fans of Star Trek. Chris Doohan, the son of Jimmy Doohan, is in there, as well as his other brother, and Yeoman Rand's son is in there. They just flooded that rec room with so many people. So it conveys that this ship really does have 432 people
Yeah,
on board.
it feels a very
So-
lived-in ship as a result. Yeah.
So the production value with the sets and everything, that's another thing I think gets discounted, or something that rewatching this film made me think, oh wow, they really had some money on this
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. One thing I would be remiss if we didn't mention and was the music. The fact that all this music eventually gets reused for Next Generation.
Right.
And that's why it's more famous and what we associate. But that theme is great. Like they don't use it for the rest of the Star Trek or the original series Star Trek movies, but
They did on Star Trek V.
is it in there? That's cool. I actually don't remember that spot, but it still it's such a classic theme that now has shaped the way we look at Star Trek
Yes.
music since then. Every spin-off show has tried to do something kind of similar because it was such a strong theme, and this movie brought it into the first place, even though it really isn't what it's known for or where it's known
Right.
from. But it's a good thing. I wouldn't want to not mention that because it's so good, and I can only imagine like watching this movie in theaters, being like, this is so much better than like the kind of cheesy Star Trek theme that was the original one.
Right.
Like,
Well, you know what? When they did something really good with that music, where they throughout the original series, the composers that they got, they would somehow incorporate the elements of the TOS
that's true. Yeah.
theme.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to bash the original theme so much. I just always in my head think of the Roddenberry lyrics that he wrote for it,
Okay.
and that's only because I had to do that in when I was like an 8th grade choir. Like we did like a TV tribute, and they did the Star Trek one. I'm like, these are horrible. But yeah, so that was a cool thing. Well, John, I can't thank you enough for coming on.
Sure.
Why don't you talk a little bit about what you're working on right now?
Okay. We're working on an original concept. When up until the point of the Star Trek fan film guidelines came out, we were working on a new spin-off, the new chapter of Starship Farragut, which was called Farragut Forward. And essentially, right related to this conversation, it was to take place in the motion after the the motion picture time frame. So the Wrath of Khan uniforms.
Yeah, doing those era
Yes.
uniforms, not this
Right.
the one-piece suits
Yes.
from this.
So we were working on that, and then the fan film guidelines came out and retooled it to be a new original concept called Vanguard, which is
Very
essentially a
cool.
space navy, and we're working on that.
Cool. All right, so not Star Trek in any way, but similar kind of like space opera kind of thing.
Yes, it'll be essentially that, a space opera that takes place 200 or 300 years. We're being nondescript in terms of exact time frame, but in the future, and it would be it's something coming out of my head in terms of relating when I was in the Navy. So taking naval elements and Navy traditions of a fleet of ships, but putting it in the space.
That's fantastic. So it's not a Star Trek series, but it's going to be kind of the same energy and spirit, basically. Yeah.
Right. Trying to retool some of the sets and props and costumes that we made, but putting it a whole different universe, whole different concept. And I've pulled from my own experiences in the Navy and trying to flash forward, 200 or 300 years, with the Navy kind of being the pivotal point.
Fantastic. Awesome. Do you have a time frame for any of the material for it? We had talked out like before we started recording about a trailer being in the future. So we're looking at like a release of like fall of 2017 for that.
Yes, the plan is that this summer and perhaps this fall we'll be working to put a 5 to 6 minute trailer for the project, and we plan to crowdfund it. And if we're successful, then we'll make an initial 3-parter web series. And if we're then, we get people that want to see more, then we can continue it all. But it is for profit because it is an original concept. So we're hoping that the fan base of Starship Farragut and the Star Trek fans that want to see some original stuff will back it.
Well, that's fantastic. I hope people get really interested in it and check it out. As soon as we have like solid dates, I'll be sure to post that myself.
Great.
It's really going to be cool.
Great.
All right. Well, John, thank you again so much. I really appreciate it.
Yes.
So, guys, thanks for tuning in. Next week, we're going to be talking about Highlander 2: The Quickening. And until then, stay scruffy, my nerf herders.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe and review the show on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.